Welcome everyone to Excel Power Hour. Today's episode is Do More with Pivot Tables. Today's August 2nd, 2 p.m. Eastern, and this is the monthly August webinar. Now, today's content will spend about 5 minutes talking about Excel Power Hour, the webinar series. Then we'll spend about 10 minutes talking about pivot table formatting basics. And then we'll discuss pivot charts and sliders and leave a couple of minutes for Q&A. It is possible that we won't even go even more than half an hour. This may be a half an hour, 45 minutes if it gets really interesting. We'll see how the questions come along and that sort of thing. Okay, what's Excel Power Hour? That's a small webinar series I created. It's in a monthly basis. We haven't been respecting the whole monthly thing for a while, so I apologize for that. This is a smaller webinar. We have about 50 people more or less log in, 50, 60 people log in live, a few extra watching in YouTube, and we're trying to grow this audience, so definitely let other people know about the Excel Power Hour webinar series. And we have a Facebook group. Just search Excel Power Hour, and hopefully we can continue the conversation to talk about Excel topics. Now, this is a monthly webinar. Usually the first Wednesday of each month will be 30 to 60 minutes long. We may have special episodes where we bring in third-party content, sponsored content, collaborated content, that sort of thing. Discussions will be Excel tips and tricks, Excel add-ons, all that stuff will be fair game. And we currently do not do CPE. This is not a CPE webinar. It's a little bit more informal. That gives me a little bit more creative freedom to do this quickly. About myself, my name is Hector Garcia. I have an accounting, technology, and tax practice out of Miami, Florida. If you need to contact me, my email is hector@garciacpa.com. hector@garciacpa.com. I'm usually pretty good at answering emails and answering questions. The next episode, we're actually going to skip September and October because it is tax season for me. So it's actually my busiest time of the year with all the extensions. So the next episode will be in November, November 2nd, and at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. And it will be Excel topics, but I'm actually going to take openly, I'll put my email up there, of what kind of things you would like for me to cover in Excel. And if I know how to cover them well, I'll do them. If I can find a good guest speaker, I will do that as well. So just email me whatever Excel topics you think we should be covering in a webinar like this, or specifically for the next webinar. The other webinars I'm involved in, it's a whole bunch, but the two next ones are going to be in August. It's going to be QB Power Hour on August 10th, and if you already subscribe to that, you're going to get your notifications at qbpowerhour.com to register if you haven't, all about QuickBooks. And then Enterprise Expert, which the next one will be August 16, which is also all about QuickBooks, but specifically QuickBooks Enterprise. And we'll be talking about QuickBooks Enterprise related topics. The episode on 8/16 at 12 p.m. Eastern would be about time tracking in QuickBooks Enterprise. And to stay connected, just check out the Facebook group, and our website is still under construction. And there's my email. The email you see on the screen and hector@garciacpa.com both work. Okay, so let's jump into the topics here. I'm going to go ahead and open Excel, and I'm going to let me close this, and I'm going to open the same sample file that I put in the handout section. So there's no handout, but there is a sample file. So you can download this sample file. So we are working on the same thing. If you want to practice along the way, you can do that. If you're watching this recording in YouTube, which is after obviously the live event, I'll put a link somewhere in the description box to download the sample file. So what you're seeing here on the screen, it's information I downloaded from QuickBooks actually, and it has things like checks, bills, journal entries, invoices. I mean, it's a whole bunch of accounting data, and this is what we're going to use to pivot. So I'm going to start by selecting my data range, and all I have to do is click anywhere that there's data and hit Control A on the keyboard, and that basically selects the entire area that has data, and that's usually what we want to pivot. We want to pivot the area that has data, and if you notice that after I hit Control A, if it doesn't select the right amount of data, something's wrong with the formatting of the table, and it's highly likely that your pivot table won't work. So we'll start with that, and then I'm going to click on the Insert button and then click on Pivot Table. Now, in the pivot table screen, we have a couple of really important things. So the first one is, what is the date range? I mean, what is the range of the data that we want to pivot, and that automatically selects the stuff that is selected already, which happened when I did Control A. Now, if you click on Use External Data Source, you can actually connect to another Excel file, to an Access database. I mean, you can do a lot of interesting things with the external data source. I don't want to get into this because that's a little bit more technical, and I will obviously love to cover that in a topic if that becomes one of the things that most people want to hear about. But we'll start with just a selected data range. Then it's asking you, do I want to set up a new worksheet, or do I want to put it inside of the existing worksheet? So if I put existing worksheet, the pivot table would be inside of a current data file, and that becomes a little bit confusing. So I'm going to go ahead and just select new worksheet and then hit OK. And you're going to see immediately a new tab gets created, or a new worksheet gets created for the pivot table. Now the pivot table itself will have a name, like this one is called pivot table 3. You see the name up here on the top right. That's how you know what the name of the pivot table is. And you can change the name if you want to, so we can give it whatever name. Let's call it sales pivot or something like that, and you just change the name up there, press enter, and that changes the name, and that becomes useful later on when it comes to dealing with Excel objects. But for now, that's really all you need to know. The other thing you want to do is you want to click on the options menu, and that's a little options button right under the name. So you click on options, and if you're doing this for the first time, I recommend that you click on the options menu and then click on display, and then click on this little box that says classic pivot table layout. And basically what that is for is just to make it easier and more visually appealing for you to construct the table itself. This is what is called the classic mode. This is how pivot tables used to look. So before you could drag and drop things into the table itself, and now you can only drag and drop into the fields on the right. But with this particular setting turned on, we can drag and drop into it. And you see that it will make total sense once we start constructing it. So there we go. Now you see that the table looks significantly different. You're going to see now 1, 2, 3, 4 areas in which we can drop information into, and that's going to be how the pivot table gets constructed, by us selecting the fields that go in there. So I'm going to start with selecting the type, and I'm going to bring that over, click and drag, and bring that over into the filter section. And basically what that allows me to do, drag it right there into the filter section, that allows me to choose which transaction type is the only one that I want to see. So let's go back to the source data real quick, and I want to scroll down to show you. Notice that there's some transactions called deposit, some called credit card charge, some called invoice. So just giving you some context. Let's say what I'm trying to pull, it's only invoices. So that's what that type filter helps me do, that it helps me select multiple. So I can click on this little box that says select multiple, or I can just select the one that I want. So if I wanted to see do select multiple, and then I want to do invoices, and let's say I want to do invoices, and I also want to do, let's say, sales receipts. There's no sales receipts in here, so just invoices. So I mean, whatever is the combination of transactions you want to do. So I'm going to click on invoice, just do one, and then hit OK. So now it's only going to show me information that it's in the that has the invoice attribute in that column called type. The next thing I want to do is maybe do something with dates. I want to click and drag date and put it under drop row fields here, right in the first one that's all the way to the left. I'll go ahead and drop that one. That way I'm going to put dates in there. And then what Excel does automatically, it's going to lay out all the dates in there. Okay, now that may not be that useful because maybe I don't want to do it by date. Maybe I want to do it by groupings of the date. So I can actually right click on that and click on group. And then I can group these by month and then hit OK. And you're going to see that now they get grouped together. So now basically it's going to group my information based on the month. Okay, perfect. So now let me go into let's go into the down here where the amounts are, and I'm going to come in here, and I got debits and I got credits. So if you know a little bit of accounting, and we got about 85% of people here, you know exactly what that means. So I'm going to grab debit, and I'm going to bring it here into the value section. Okay, I can also click and drag it into the drop value section here. So I can click, drag that, and that's going to give me, in this case, it's summing them. It's counting them. So this is showing me all the debit lines, or the lines that have a debit line in, for example, for each month. But that's not really that valuable to me to know what the count is. So if I wanted to change that, I would click on right here where it says count of debit and click on value field settings. And that would allow me to do is change it from a count to a sum. And now the stuff is going to start making a lot more sense. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And that, okay, so that works. That those look more like dollar amounts. Now what I can also do, I can right click on the number itself and click on format cells. Okay, and then I can change the formatting. However, this formatting is not dynamic. It will be static. So as the pivot table moves around, format cells is not the best way to go. What I want to do is I want to right click in there and click on value field settings, which by the way, I just want to go down here where it says sum of debit and click on value field settings just to acknowledge that it's the same thing to right click on the table itself or on the field. And then I'm going to click on number format. Okay, I'm going to click right there, that button, number format, and then I'm going to select currency, and then let's say I don't want to see decimals, and then I hit OK, and that would now be a dynamic setting. So no matter how this table moves around, that number would be, that formatting would be dynamically in there. Perfect. So now I got my invoice sales per month that hit my debit account. Now that could be an issue. Like if you're an accountant, maybe you're thinking, I'm not sure exactly what that means. Let's do the credit as well, and we'll bring those down into the value section. So we have it right under sum of debit, and then we'll do the same thing. Make sure that it's not a count. Make sure that it's a sum, and also make sure that it has the number formatting as a currency, and we set no decimals. Okay, that way we're following the same philosophy, and the rules of accounting say the debits add up to the credits, so that number should be accurate. But now once we start getting into the details, things can get a little bit more complicated. So we'll get there and we'll kind of see what that means. If this whole debit credit thing is too confusing and your data table doesn't have that and it has more of an amount, then you can just settle with the amount and that would be okay. In this particular case, the reason why I did it is because every transaction, like I'm going to show you right here, I'm going to highlight this real quick to show you, every transaction in this particular table has a debit amount and also credit amounts, and I just want to make sure that if you add them together or use an amount, the total will be zero. So in this particular table contains both debits and credits, I have to separate them in order for this to make sense, and that's because it's an accounting table, not necessarily a straight data table. This data table only contain amounts, then you wouldn't have to worry about debits and credits. So this is just a particular example because I am getting the data from QuickBooks. Now here where it says account type, this is kind of interesting. Account type is going to say whether it's income or whether it's accounts receivable. So I'm going to grab account type and then I'm going to bring that down into right under rows. So that way I'm going to have my date and then I'm going to have my account type. You can see how that makes sense. So I'll click on that and now you start seeing that during January we have total accounts receivable of $25,000, total sales of $25,000, and then you see total cost of goods sold and total current assets. Now, if you're an accountant, you're loving this because this makes total accounting sense. But the reason why I'm explaining it from an accountant's perspective is because I am one, and 85% of the people that answer the question were accountants, and the data itself, it's accounting data. So I want to make sure that we're not confused about this stuff. Now, one of the things that could be useful for this is, let's say for example, I can also narrow down and only want to see my income and cost of goods sold. That way I see my sales and my cost of sales, and then I can hide accounts receivable and other current asset because this stuff is not useful, and we can do that. So I'm going to click on the drop down menu here, and then I'm going to unclick select all, and then I'm just going to show my income, and the other one was cost of goods sold. That way I see my costs and I see my sales. Perfect. So this is great because now I'm starting to see all my sales and all my costs for each month. But to take it one step further, we actually now that we're running the filter, we actually don't need to split them up like that. We can actually just change the title of this to cost, and change the title of this to sales. Okay, and then I can get rid of my account type, put it back into the field section, and as long as my account type has an active filter, notice that I have the active filter here, that will be functional. And that was kind of the reason for that. Now, if for some reason it's not showing, why is that? I'm going to bring the account type over to the filter section now. That way I can have my filters to be active. I just wanted to make sure that was the case. So even though I got rid of it from the row section, I made sure that I put it in the filter section. That way the filter itself could be active. So there we go. So now I got my costs, I got my sales, and now I'm starting to see the information make a little bit more sense. Now, another thing I can do is I can bring my customer information. So I'm going to come down here and bring source name, which is actually the customer name, and I'm bring that over down under date. That way I'm going to have month, and then I'm going to have my customer's name. So now I have my sales for the month with every single customer name under it, and then I have my cost and my sales account. My sales amount. Okay. To take it one step further, make this a little bit interesting, is I can also look for my invoice number. So I just want to show you the raw data here. Somewhere around here, I'm going to have an invoice number. Let me just make sure that makes sense. Okay, that's right here, column C. That's going to be this one called number. That's actually representing my invoice number. So I'm going to bring that into my pivot table so I can break them down by customer and by invoice number. Again, that's assuming that this is something that's useful for you. So I'm going to bring that under source name, and now I'm able to see my customer's name and my invoice number. Now this starts becoming a little bit confusing just because it seems like there's just way too many numbers. Now we can talk about formatting, which is really the core one I wanted to talk to you about. It's formatting this table so it's more physically attractive, or it's just easier to read. So I'm going to click on the design button right on the top under pivot table tools. I'm going to click on design, and then right here where it says subtotals, I'm going to click on don't show subtotals. Okay, that way I'm not doing the subtotals, so this becomes way easier to read. And then under grand totals, I can also turn them off. So let's say I don't want to total them by month, or maybe I do, so I can do turn them on, and then you're going to see the grand total all the way at the bottom. So if you want to see the grand totals, yes or no, that would be up to you. In this case, I'm just going to turn them off. Now, report layout is interesting. So right now it's on, it was on the outline form. So this is the compact form that takes it away from a sort of a tabular format, and it nests each invoice number under the customer name. The outline form, it's this one that you see there, not that useful. And then we got the tabular format, which is my favorite. I think this is the easiest to read, the tabular format. Now there's one more setting, which is what happens when there's empty cells under it. So under the tabular format, I can click where it says repeat all item labels, and then they will get repeated and it won't have any blanks in between. Let me just remove this around. Perfect. So if that's too much, then I'll get rid of the repeating labels, and that gets you there. So I wanted to make sure that at this point we kind of know where we are. Okay, we are at this point where this is just a basic pivot table, and I want to talk about more the formatting. So for example, you see here where it says pivot style options, row headers, column headers, banded rows, banded columns. You want to kind of play with this to see, what is the best visual way to see your pivot table. So it's up to you what you want to highlight, what you don't want to highlight. I like banded rows. Depending on the situation, you may want that or not. Also in the pivot styles, you got some quick styles here that are pretty neat. We can go and change the color. It changes the formatting, it changes the highlighting. I mean, really up to you on what's easier to read, what's going to be more attractive when you print it. I mean, all that stuff is going to obviously be a personal preference. Okay, so those are the basic pivot table formatting. Now, the other thing you want to do or think about doing is something called a calculated field. Now here where it says analyze, I can insert a calculated field. So I'm going to show you how that works. So up here in the top, it says calculations, field, items, and sets. So I'm going to click on this drop down and click on calculated field. So I'm going to create a new field and I'm going to call this gross profit. Okay, so I got a new field called gross profit, and then basically I just do a standard formula. So I'm going to do, in this case, I'm going to do the credit, insert minus the debit. Okay, just to remind you, these are the actual original field names. We changed them to cost and sales. If you remember correctly, we changed that to them just on the report itself, but the field itself, it's credit and debit. And I'm going to go ahead and click on OK and OK, and that's now going to have my sum profit. That's basically just going to calculate it. In this case, I can just change this for display purposes and call this one profit. Now, the reason why that's valuable is that maybe I want to calculate a commission by salesperson, whatever it happens to be. So I can come in here and look for rep, and rep is another field that we have here, and rep is it has the name of each rep. I can come in here and rep, and I can do multiple things. One is I can bring it over the column section, drop it up here, and now we're going to see for each rep the cost, the sales, and the profit. And depending on the order, I can put the rep on the top, and then I can see for a rep called JG, which in QuickBooks, I don't know, John Gomez, whatever, and then Mike Kramer, and then Vicky Kramer, whatever happens to be, they're using that. We can actually break them down and then see our profit per rep all in one table. So that's just one application I'm kind of doing here on the fly. I mean, there's so many different things that could be done. So again, that maybe that's something we want to do, or maybe it's something we don't want to do. Now the other thing is here is we can actually hide debit and credit. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that and just keep my profit. And then I'm strictly just looking at the profit in this particular case. So that works really nicely. And I can actually take my rep and bring it over to the filter section. And then I want to just see my profit for just one particular rep. So I can choose JG, hit OK, and then this report only shows me my profit by customer, by invoice for JG. In this case, I'll choose MK, and then again, I'm only seeing my profit per invoice per rep. So that's a really important piece. Another part that's interesting about this is we can also break this down by item. So I'm going to go ahead and take the date out. I'm going to bring that back into the field section and take the source name out. And I'm just going to have, now I just have my invoice numbers. And then I'm looking at just one particular rep. Okay, that's fine. And then I'm going to look for item. So I'm going to go down here to item. I'm going to bring item down to the row section. And now we're going to see on each invoice all the items and then all the profit for the item. Again, remember that we're using the profit calculated field, something that QuickBooks doesn't track, but it does have the cost portion and the sales portion. And remember, we kind of united them by using that account type filter. Okay, and then now we have pretty much profit at the item level in this case, which makes it really, really interesting. Now we could also have other values. For example, here under quantity, I can click and drag quantity down to the value section. And now I have, and instead of doing count, I'm going to do sum, because I want to sum up all the quantities. So now I'm going to have, how many of the product was sold. I wonder if sum of quantity, why is that coming up as 0? Okay, that's coming up as 0 because of the combination of debits and credits. So that's actually, that's a little bit tricky. I'm going to bring account type. That's important. I'm going to bring account type here under item real quick just so we can see it. For some reason, either quantity is not reporting. I'm going to double click on one of them to see. Yeah, I think it's because it's combining debits and credits. For some reason it's not doing it, so I would have to do something interesting with quantity to make that work. For the time being, I'll ignore it. I mean, I guess I could go back and clean that up, but not at the moment. So quantity doesn't work just because of the way the filters are working. It's just because we have this account type where we're including cost and income. So I would have to real quick remove cost from it and hit OK if I actually wanted to see the movement of quantity. So that's a really important piece. The only reason why this is functioning um, is because I only have one side of the equation. So if I wanted to see quantity, I couldn't bring both the cost line and the income line because they basically net out each other. So that's just technicalities about how the table itself, how the raw data is set up. But that's just kind of one application of what happens when you combine multiple things. Okay, so let's see what questions we have. So somebody says, can you show me how to change a memo from the bank so certain letters are displayed? You can tell if Excel to put matching the vendor name with a new column. I'm not sure what that means. I think she's talking about possibly cleaning up vendor names in Excel. I would refer, Amy, I would refer you to an earlier webinar we had for Excel Power Hour where we talk about cleaning up the data because data cleanup is an entirely different concept. Once you get to pivot tables, you're assuming the data it's 100% clean. But I will show you something that is kind of within those lines because it is pertinent. Let me move this information over. I want to move all this information over. Boom, 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 type. And then let me bring in the customer's name again. Bring that down to rows. And now what we see here is customer name and the sales or the profit, whatever we have. But notice that these names, the way they're arranged is we have a customer name and then we have a column and then we have a store number. And you see it's kind of like a pattern here, customer name, column, store number. So one of the things that would be nice is if the data itself came with that information split, like if it had a customer name on one field and it had the store number in a different field, then that could help get us to a place where I can separate them. But the raw data doesn't have that. So I'm going to show you how to separate that. Let me go all the way up and look for source name. Here's source name. And I just want to make sure that okay, there it is. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, and you have to pay attention, this stuff gets really, really tricky. So let me make all the columns a little bit smaller. And I'm going to focus on this one called source name here. And what I'll do just to check and just make sure that I don't have any data override, I'm going to insert 5 blank lines after source name. I'm going to right click and click on insert. And then I'm going to call this one job 1, job 2. And basically this is potentially how I can have sub names under that customer. So I'm doing job 1, job 2, and job 4. Now I know that in QuickBooks we can't go any deeper than 5 layers. So I'm safe by inserting those 4 in there, and that's it. Okay. So that being said, let me come over here, and then I'm going to scroll down to something that has data in there, so just so we can see it. There it is. So we see that we have data here, and we have something that's called a delimiter. A delimiter is when you have a common symbol that is separating from a big field, separating potentially 2 fields. So a delimiter like a colon can be used to separate them. So I'm going to select the whole source name here, and then I'm going to click on data and then click on text to columns. Let me just scroll down so we're looking at, okay. So then I'm going to click on text to columns, and then it's going to ask me, okay, how is this being separated, with a fixed width or delimited? So a fixed width doesn't work because you have some names that are different than the others. So I'm going to use delimited and then hit next. And then I'm going to select, it's not a tab, it's going to be an other, and it's going to be a column. So I'm just going to type the column in there. And again, what I'm doing is I'm finding any fields that have a column and I'm splitting them off as if they're different fields. I'm going to go ahead and click on next and click finish and then hit OK. And then I'm going to scroll down and just label this job 1 again. Scroll down, and then I'm going to see that some of my customer names have been split off, name and job. So now I'm going to go back into my pivot table. I'm going to click on analyze and click on refresh, and that's going to bring new information. The problem is that my data source got all screwed up. So I'm going to click on change data source. I'm going to click here again and hit Control A. Remember, I changed the whole table, so I have to sort of refresh the data source, hit OK, and then click refresh one more time. And now I have source name and then job second. And let me get rid of these values and bring in the sales amount again. So I'm going to bring in my credits and bring them here under values, and then bring that again as sum. And remember, because I broke the original table, the table got messed up. So that's normal, okay? Because I'm making changes on that. Let me go back to currency, and we set no decimals, and then hit OK. Okay, perfect. So now I got my customer name, I got my job, and then I got my dollar amount. So that's, again, that has to do with how the data comes in from QuickBooks in this case, because I exported raw QuickBooks data. All right, so at this point, I think we've got a pretty good deep lesson on pivot tables. Let's talk about what else we can do with pivot tables that's interesting. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to create a chart with it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to talk about the pivot chart. So I'm going to click on pivot chart, and then in some cases you're going to have an automatic suggestion, which is telling you, okay, you can do a column, or you can do an area, or you can do a bar graph. I mean, you may have to go through here and see which graph makes the most sense. Okay, so I'm going to do column and then hit OK, and then we're going to have a pivot chart. Now, what's nice about a pivot chart in particular is that you can use filters on the pivot chart live. So for example, if I want to do account type and I want to include, let's say, not include cost of goods sold, only include sales, I would do that there. If I want to change the rep, I can do that here, and then you're going to see the graph completely change. We can get rid of some of these extra information like that legend. I don't need that, so select it and delete that. Let's see what else we got here. Maybe the source name. Okay, maybe I want to be able to change the source name here on the fly, run filters, or change the specific job on the fly. I mean, all that stuff can be done with a pivot chart. So just imagine a live chart in which all of the filters from the pivot table are live, and the table itself can be running one filter. Okay, so, and I can change them on the table, and it will also change them on the chart live. So that's actually pretty cool. You can see both the raw data and the chart data. So that's why I love pivot chart. Something else that I really like is something called slicer. So I'm going to bring in a slicer. I'm going to click on insert slicer, and I can use this slicer for my, let's say I'm going to do it for my rep, and then click OK. And then once I do that, now I have almost like a dashboard, right? So I have my pivot table on the left, I have my pivot chart in the middle. Let me close this, and then I have the slicer, which basically what it is, it's a filter that I can click on, right? So it just kind of makes it feel a little bit more dynamic. Notice how I'm just clicking on them, and it's cycling through. And I can have I can have multiple slicers here. So I'm going to insert. Let me select my pivot table, click on analyze, and do another slicer, and then I'll do a slicer for the date, and then hit OK. And what's nice is it will automatically do it based on months. Okay, so I'm gonna, let's say, select just January, just February, just March, just April, just July. Notice that I'm going down, and obviously the chart is being heavily modified. That's why it's looking particularly different. If you change the formatting around, it will then have a fixed formatting and it won't move around so much. But this kind of lets you know, and I can do shift click, so I can do March, April, and I'm holding the shift key while I'm clicking down, and that's giving me multiple information. I can do January, I can do July. With control click, I can do January. Let's say I want to do January, July, and October. So I can, so there's also the capacity to select multiple ones along the way. I don't have to select a specific range. So I can just randomly select whichever months I want, and you can turn off and on that feature with a little checkbox here that says multi-select. So if I unclick multi-select, then I can just only click on one or click and drag to do multiple. But if I click on multi-select, I can turn off and on whichever I want. So that's really cool about slicers and pivot graphs. And look, pivot tables take a whole bunch more than uh, than 30 minutes or 45 minutes to do. And there's so many things you can do with pivot tables. We're literally just scratching the surface. And I'll also be very transparent with you. Pivot tables are not my area of expertise. This is simply what I know how to do. I mean, I know how to do a few more things, but this is simply what I know what to do. So I wanted to kind of stop it at there. Let me take a look at what questions I have. So someone says, can you share the pivot table charts and make updates to the table? Let me see. If you can share the table charts and make updates to the table, will that automatically be updated with a shared user? So, Robin, I don't know if you're talking about sharing with some sort of Microsoft technology, like a SharePoint or something like that. And I would say yes. Generally speaking, if your raw data changes, your chart changes. So I'll show you. Like for example, we have this sale from Sean Martin, the Sean Martin job. Notice that dollar amount there, 1540 42. Actually, let's be more specific. Let's do January. Let me look for a particular job. So we got this Brian Stern job. So I'm gonna go to the raw data here, and then I'm gonna look for Brian Stern. Where is my job one? And then I'm gonna do Control F and type Brian. Okay, so there's my Brian Stern job, and I'm gonna come in here and change the dollar amount. So I'm gonna come here and actually change. Let me just make sure I'm on the right one here. So this is all my Brian Stern work right here. I'm going to select it here. I'm just going to highlight it yellow just so I remember it. And then what I'm going to modify are the dollar amounts. So I'm going to come in here. Where's my debit and credit? Okay, AF and AG. So I'm going to go down to AF and AG. And just for the heck of it, I'm just going to put a bunch of zeros. And all I'm doing is I'm modifying the raw data just to satisfy that question that, hey, what happens if the data on the table changes? I'm going to go back into my sheet, and this hasn't been updated. So I have to click on Analyze and refresh, and notice now it's a 0. So maybe that answers your question about whether the data comes in automatically. Somebody says, how do you import the data from QuickBooks? So I didn't. I basically created a report that contained all the data, and I exported it to Excel. So it wasn't something I imported from QuickBooks. I basically created a report, an Excel report with all the raw data for Excel. So James, that's the answer to your question. I did not hit some magic import button to bring it in there. Let's see. How do you calculate a column in an older version of Excel? Tiffany, honestly, I can't keep track of all these versions of software. I mean, I deal with so much software that so I really don't know if there's a different way. I know that in Excel 2010, I used to do calculated fields. So I don't know if you're referring to something even older than 2010. So I apologize for that. I'll tell you, maybe Google that. And somebody said asking, is this Excel 2016? The answer is yes. However, nothing that I've shown is different from Excel 2007 and newer. So 2007 and newer is pretty much all the same thing, but they do change a couple of things here and there. Somebody says, have you ever worked with Microsoft BI? Does this work? So there's something called Microsoft Power BI where you can take Excel data and do really cool things about it. Honestly, I don't know anything about it. I mean, I know it exists, but I'm just not equipped to demonstrate it. I would love to know. I would love to talk to someone that does know and bring them in. I think Microsoft Power BI would be a really awesome thing to show. Okay, let me run a quick polling question and show you one more thing, and then we'll be done. So here's a quick polling question. Okay, somebody's asking, what if I have multiple tables? Could I bring in data from multiple tables? So the answer is yes. I don't have time to show it, but in my YouTube channel, I do have a video on pivot tables. It's called Excel 2016 pivot tables or something like that. And I would suggest that you look up that video that's in there, where in for 2016 they added a really easy, neat feature to be able to add multiple tables. So because that would take me much more than 10 minutes, whatever time I have left, I'm not gonna do it. But yes, I do have a video on that. It's actually pretty free. Somebody says, what are some good free basic resources for learning pivot tables? So, Edwin, I would say, the only one I know it's YouTube, right? The almighty YouTube. You search anything you like in YouTube, there will likely be videos on that, and almost everything in YouTube is free. Um, Pivot table, it's only in Excel Pro Plus. To be sure, you have that version. So, Joy, I'm not sure what Excel Pro Plus is. I have the Excel that comes with Microsoft Office 365 that I pay like $10 a month for, or $99 a year for. So I'm not sure which is Excel Pro Plus, Joy. So maybe comparing it to some free basic version of Excel that comes with this with Windows. That's true. You have to have a purchased version, or an active subscription to Microsoft Office 365 to have a functional version of Excel. That would actually make sense. Okay, let me close the polling question and share the results real quick just in case you're intrigued. 21% of the people here never used a pivot table before. 28% don't really use it, but they play with them. 43% use it every once in a while, and only 8% use it a lot. I guess I would love to ask a polling question is, are you going to use more from now on? All right, so I'll ask you one. I'll just show you one more thing. A lot of people ask me, why I create so much content online and for free, and it is true. I think pretty much everything you can learn from me, it's on YouTube, and it's all scattered around within a bunch of videos. Most of the stuff that I do is Excel and QuickBooks, mostly QuickBooks and Excel. I did create an academy in which we have some organized videos, and they go in sequential order. It's called QuickBooks and Excel Academy by Hector Garcia and friends, and the domain name is quickbooks.teachable.com. Now, again, if you're looking for something structured that goes step by step, lesson by lesson, that kind of walks you through some logical steps, then feel free to visit the website and see what I have. If you're looking for free content, just go into my YouTube channel. And so I realize that some of you watch this in YouTube already, so you don't have to know this. But if you just go to YouTube and put Hector Garcia CPA on the search, it will land you into my channel. And there's a lot of videos there. I'll probably say about 250 videos on QuickBooks, maybe 50 on accounting and accounting related stuff, and maybe 25 on Excel. I'm building up the Excel library, and that has over 12,000 subscribers, almost 2 million views. So there's plenty of people watching it. But if you're looking for more of a course, you can go to quickbooks.teachable.com. I put the link down there, and then I have basically two courses. One is called Learn QuickBooks Desktop in 2 days. That's a $47 course. That's course done by me. It's my 2-day class. I teach live, taught in a video format, and that's a $47 one-time fee. You'll have unlimited access. And then I partnered up with Norman, who's a master in Excel, and he built a class, and it's a very boutique class. It's 15 lessons that are very pertinent to accountants. It's $150. I realized that one's a little bit more expensive, but his lessons are really highly produced. I'll sample one. I'll show you a sample real quick of one so you see, and that's all through the academies. And actually, if you go to this website, one of the lessons is completely free. So I want to show you what that looks like when you click on that. When you enroll at first, it will just ask you for your email, and when you scroll down, this one, lesson 5 on text to columns, which is one of the things I showed, you click on preview, and that lesson itself, it's freely available. So there it is. So you see how it's produced. So yes, I am promoting it. I would love to sell some. I'm helping my friend Norman get his videos out there because it's really really good. And yes, I'm just being honest with you. I would love to sell some of my classes, but again, if you already follow my work in YouTube, a lot of the content can be found for free. Anyway, I want to I'll ask the last polling question just to kind of know whether or not you learned something new, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up if we don't have any more questions. Let's see. In your business, how do you use pivot tables for your customers or workflow? So, Joy, I use pivot tables to create custom reports for my clients. So, a lot of my clients are using QuickBooks Desktop, and there are limitations on the type of reports you can create with QuickBooks Desktop, although it's pretty powerful. So, what I end up doing a lot is either teach my clients how to export the data, create their own pivot tables, and I charge big money for that because that's training, that's one-time shot, or I create the reports for them offline. Okay, so I create the reports for them and give it to them, and obviously I absolutely charge for that. Something else is, somebody else is saying, how much is Excel? Look, I pay, I think, $100 a year for my Office 365 subscription. Don't know if that's accurate, but I think it's $99 a year for my Office 365 subscription. And at my office, we pay other fees because it's the business version and it's got multiple users. It's like $6 a user per month or something like that. Let's see what else we got. No, that's it. So I'll go ahead and close the polling question. We have about 85% of the votes. It looks like 59% of you says almost everything was new, and 41% said, yeah, some stuff was new, but I was familiar with it. I'll go ahead and close the poll. There's my email. There's the link to the website to register, to recommend it to friends and colleagues, and the Facebook group if you want to continue the conversation. So thank you very much for attending, and you have a wonderful rest of your day.